C.S Lewis once said, "Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." Have you ever felt overwhelmed by your suffering, questioning why you have to endure such pain? The challenges we face, while deeply painful, hold the potential to lead us toward salvation. Embracing our suffering rather than denying it allows us to confront our losses head-on. In this moment, we stand at a crossroads. We can choose the path of resentment, leading to vengeance and further pain, or we can opt for forgiveness, which ushers in grace and healing. The choice is profoundly personal and transformative. Will you cling to bitterness, nurturing grudges and pain, or will you release these burdens, allowing your soul to heal? It's within your power to decide. Stay with us as we delve deeper into this message of hope and transformation. If you find this content resonating with you, please like and leave a comment before we move on to the next topic. Can I hear a hallelujah from you? Your presence here reveals that you have already embarked on a significant journey. You have chosen to traverse the path of forgiveness towards grace, mirroring Christ's sacrificial act on the cross. Christ endured immense suffering and the agony of abandonment, emotions familiar to us all. C.S. Lewis profoundly noted, "Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." Have you ever pondered why suffering is such an integral part of our existence? Could it be that through our trials, we draw closer to God's love and understand his grace more deeply? Even if Jesus did not experience your specific trials, he intimately understands the essence of human suffering. He felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of loneliness, and the weight of pain. Rather than fleeing from your suffering, seek solace in God. Approach him with your burdens, for in your deepest struggles, his presence offers the most profound comfort. There comes a moment in each of our lives when a profound choice must be made to regard those who have caused our suffering with compassion and forgiveness. This is the key that unlocks the gates of heaven. This wish I hold for all of you, as well as for myself. Despite the depths of my own suffering, I recognize that many of you have endured even greater trials, and I deeply admire your resilience. You are here, seeking grace, which becomes attainable when you view your tormentors through the eyes of Jesus. This perspective allows you to discern their true needs and feel a compassionate understanding for the ones who have wronged you. You might think, such forgiveness is impossible. However, consider the example of Jesus on the cross. With nails driven through his hands and feet, Jesus gazed upon those who tormented him and uttered, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." In that moment of excruciating agony, Jesus chose compassion over condemnation. C.S. Lewis, in his reflections on pain and suffering, reminds us that to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. This profound insight compels us to confront our inner turmoil. Have you ever pondered what holds you back from extending forgiveness? What pain resides so deeply within that it seems insurmountable to release? By examining these questions, we can better understand our struggles and recognize the transformative power of forgiveness. Lewis also posits, we are all fallen creatures and all very hard to live with. This acknowledgement of our shared brokenness fosters empathy and paves the way for genuine compassion. Imagine looking at your adversaries not as enemies but as fellow flawed humans, deserving of the same grace you seek. In doing so, you align yourself with the teachings of Christ and the wisdom of Lewis, embarking on a path where healing and forgiveness are not just possible but profoundly liberating. Paul admonishes us with, "Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus." This profound statement calls us to embrace forgiveness as a conscious choice. But how often do we struggle to forgive, clinging to the wrongs done to us? C.S. Lewis insightfully remarked, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." Reflecting on this, we are reminded that our forgiveness should not hinge on the actions of others, but on the boundless mercy God has shown us. Have you ever pondered the magnitude of God's grace in your life? His mercy is a beacon, illuminating our path to forgive. As Lewis illustrates through the story of Edmund and the lion, The Witch and the Wardrobe. True forgiveness transforms both the giver and the receiver. Edmund's betrayal and subsequent forgiveness by Aslan exemplify the divine grace that should inspire us. When we internalize how profoundly we have been forgiven, the barriers to forgiving others begin to crumble. How can we withhold forgiveness when we are daily beneficiaries of such divine mercy? So, let us forgive, not because others deserve it, but because we have been enveloped in God's inexhaustible grace. In Matthew 18, Jesus illustrated a profound lesson with the parable of the unforgiving servant. He said, "Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents, millions of dollars, was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he, his wife, his children, and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. The servant fell on his knees before him. 'Be patient with me,' he begged, 'and I will pay back everything now.' We know that's impossible, the debt is too big. But the servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go." C.S. Lewis, in his insightful works, often delves into the nature of divine mercy and forgiveness. He posed the question, can a mortal ask questions which God finds unanswerable? This reflection can be likened to the servant's plea and acknowledgement of human limits and the boundless grace of God. Are there moments in your life where you feel the weight of an insurmountable debt, not just financially, but emotionally or spiritually? Lewis's writings remind us that God's grace is not bound by our failings, it surpasses our greatest shortcomings. Consider the depth of the king's compassion, which mirrors God's readiness to forgive our most significant transgressions. Lewis once remarked, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." How often do we struggle to extend the same mercy to others that we seek from God? This parable challenges us to reflect on our own hearts. Can we kneel and ask for patience, fully believing in the transformative power of divine mercy? The servant's master, moved by pity, canceled the immense debt and set him free, just as Christ's sacrifice offers us liberation from our own spiritual debts. In our moments of despair and feeling overwhelmed by our burdens, do we turn to God, trusting in His infinite compassion to renew and restore us? By intertwining Jesus' teachings with the profound reflections of C.S. Lewis, we are invited to explore the limitless mercy of God and our response to it. What does this boundless forgiveness mean for us today, and how can we embody it in our lives? Through this parable, we are called to not only seek forgiveness but to become vessels of that same grace to others. When the forgiven servant left, he encountered a fellow servant who owed him 100 denarii, a modest day's wage. Without hesitation, he seized him by the throat, demanding immediate repayment. Desperate, the fellow servant fell to his knees, pleading, "Be patient with me, and I will repay you." But the first servant refused, casting him into prison until he could clear the debt. Witnessing this, the other servants were deeply troubled and reported everything to their master. Summoning the unforgiving servant, the master rebuked him. "You wicked servant! I forgave your enormous debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you have shown the same mercy to your fellow servant in his wrath?" The master handed him over to the jailers until he repaid all he owed. Jesus concluded, "This is how my heavenly Father will treat you unless you forgive your brother from your heart." C.S. Lewis once remarked, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." This profound statement illuminates the essence of forgiveness and the complexities of the human heart. Despite experiencing God's boundless mercy, we often struggle to extend that same grace to others. Consider the parable of the unforgiving servant in Matthew 18 verse 21 to 35, where the master's anger reflects divine justice. Have you ever found yourself holding on to grudges, clutching them as the first servant did his fellow's throat? Why is it so challenging to release others from the debts they owe us, even when we've been forgiven so much more? Reflecting on this parable, we must confront our own shortcomings in forgiveness. Lewis's works remind us that the journey of faith is not just about receiving grace, but about embodying it in our interactions with others. Forgiveness, as Lewis suggests, is a profound act of humility and recognition of our own forgiven state. He elaborates on this in his book, Mere Christianity, where he discusses the difficulty and necessity of forgiving those who wrong us, emphasizing that forgiveness is not about excusing the wrong but about releasing the hold it has on us. In your moments of introspection, ask yourself, am I mirroring the mercy I've received, or am I trapping others in the prison of my resentment? Do you find yourself measuring others' worthiness of forgiveness by the severity of their transgressions, forgetting that your own forgiveness came at a great cost, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross? Lewis encourages us to remember that every act of forgiveness is a reflection of Christ's love and sacrifice. Consider the impact of harboring unforgiveness. It is not just a spiritual burden but a mental and emotional one, creating barriers in your relationship with God and others. Forgiveness, then, becomes not just a divine command but a pathway to genuine spiritual freedom. It frees you from the chains of bitterness and allows you to experience the fullness of God's love. In the spirit of Lewis's teachings, ponder this: what steps can you take today to release the unforgiveness you hold? How can you embody the grace that has been so freely given to you? Embracing forgiveness is a journey that transforms your heart, aligns you with God's will, and brings you closer to the freedom and peace that only He can provide. The servant in the parable was handed over to the tormentors not because of his debt to the master, but due to his unforgiveness towards his fellow servant. Reflect on the vastness of God's forgiveness towards us. Is it merely a trivial amount or a colossal debt that we could never repay? Consider this: are you harboring resentment against someone? Some offenses against us are indeed monumental, with abuses that defy comprehension. Yet, in the grand eternal perspective, even those grievous sins equate to a day's wage. C.S. Lewis poignantly observed, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." Jesus' teachings implore us to release these burdens of unforgiveness. We often imprison ourselves within our own unforgiveness, creating a personal hell of torment and unrest. What is it that you cannot let go of? Is there a pain or a grudge that you cling to, thinking it justifies your anger? Lewis wisely noted, everyone says forgiveness is a lovely idea. Until they have something to forgive, this encapsulates the struggle many of us face. We must understand that true freedom lies in forgiveness. It is the key to unlocking the shackles that bind our hearts and souls. By forgiving, we not only follow Christ's command, but also experience the profound liberation that comes from aligning ourselves with God's infinite mercy. So, what steps can you take today to forgive and set yourself free? You might find yourself grappling with the thought, how can I possibly forgive that person after the immense hurt they caused me? It feels unjust and undeserved to let them off the hook. Indeed, your feelings are valid. Forgiveness often defies our innate sense of justice. Yet, as C.S. Lewis poignantly reflects in his writings, forgiveness transcends mere fairness and delves into the realm of divine grace. He once remarked, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." This profound truth invites us to shift our perspective. Is it not the grace of God that we rely on daily, despite our flaws and failures? Forgiveness, therefore, is not about the scales of justice balancing perfectly. It is about extending the grace we've received, a grace that is boundless and unconditional. Consider the emotional and spiritual burden you carry when clinging to resentment. Are you not imprisoned by your own bitterness, unable to fully grasp the freedom that God offers? C.S. Lewis, in his exploration of human pain and divine love, encourages us to let go, for it is in releasing others that we ourselves are set free. By unclenching our fists from the throats of those who have wronged us, we open our hands to receive the boundless grace of God. In doing so, we reflect the heart of our Heavenly Father, loving with compassion and kindness, just as He loves us. It's called grace. Honestly, we don't get grace. We think we're pretty good. And if God is judging on a curve, we might think we're better than our roommate. That's not how it goes. We begin to think of ourselves too highly, which is why we're so judgy, and we think too lowly of the love of God. We have no idea of His holiness and His love. We don't get grace. We love it theoretically, But when it gets very practical and tangible, it gets tough. Jesus says, "Okay, you're not getting it. Let me give you a parable. Imagine you're running a business. This story might challenge your sense of fairness. There was a vineyard owner who hired workers at different times of the day. At dawn, he hired the first group. Every 2 hours, he brought in more workers. Finally, at the 11th hour, he hired another group who only worked for an hour. At the end of the day, he paid all the workers the same wage, starting with those who worked the least. Naturally, the ones who toiled all day expected to receive more, but they were paid the same amount. They grumbled. But the master responded, "Friend, I am not being unjust to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." C.S. Lewis, in his profound reflections, often touched on the paradoxes of God's kingdom. He once asked, "Why should we not experience the same grace and generosity that God extends to others?" This parable challenges us to reflect on our sense of justice. Are we not all recipients of God's boundless grace, regardless of our earthly measures of fairness? Lewis reminds us that God's ways are higher than ours, and His generosity often confounds our human logic. Consider the pain of feeling overlooked or undervalued. How do we reconcile our human desire for justice with the divine economy of grace? The vineyard owner's actions invite us to trust in God's wisdom and to embrace the radical nature of His love. What if, in questioning the fairness of God's gifts, we are missing the point of His unmerited favor? Let us ponder this and find peace in the assurance that God's generosity is vast and incomprehensible, extending to all who labor in His vineyard. If this starts to bother you, it might be because we tend to believe that our own efforts contribute to our salvation, and we resent the boundless generosity of Jesus. He saves some early, some later, with none of us having earned it. Some grumble, saying, "It's not fair." We often resent God's generosity. Admit it, it happens to you. Some were saved early, perhaps during vacation Bible school, living righteously their entire lives. Then we see testimony videos of those who have utterly wrecked their lives but still received the same heavenly reward. You might think, seriously, but if you truly know Jesus, you won't. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less." This profound statement challenges us to examine our attitudes towards others who receive God's grace. Do we, deep down, harbor resentment because we believe we have earned more favor through our deeds and righteous living? Lewis's writings consistently remind us that God's grace is not transactional. It is a freely given gift to all, regardless of their past actions or life choices. Let's consider the parable of the prodigal son, where the elder brother resents his father's generosity towards his wayward sibling. The elder brother feels that his years of faithful service and obedience should earn him more favor and reward than his repentant, prodigal brother. Are we, like the elder brother, missing the profound joy of shared grace because we are so focused on perceived fairness and our misguided sense of merit? Ask yourself, do you feel slighted or envious when someone with a tumultuous past receives the same grace and forgiveness that you do? Could it be that this feeling stems from a misplaced belief that our good deeds make us more deserving of God's grace? Reflect on Lewis's insights and question whether your understanding of grace truly aligns with God's infinite and impartial generosity. Grace is not about fairness or earning. It is about the boundless love and mercy of God extended to all, without exception. Consider the deeper implications of this understanding. If we truly embrace the notion that salvation is a gift, not a reward, how might that transform our relationships with others and our own spiritual journey? Embracing this truth can lead us to a profound peace and joy in seeing others saved and blessed, regardless of their past. It calls us to a higher standard of humility and gratitude, recognizing that we, too, are recipients of this undeserved grace. Let us find peace in the joy of others being saved and celebrate the boundless generosity of God, who loves and forgives without partiality. The grace of God doesn't free you to sin, it frees you from sin. It frees you from the bondage of all the things the enemy tries to tie you down with. Don't ever look down your nose at the salvation or the grace received by anybody else and begrudge the generosity of God toward you. Fair leads all of us to a Christless eternity that we have earned. It is the abounding grace of God that we get to even know Him.